the material I use. Paper makers call this pulp. Any material you use to make paper is called pulp, no matter if it's cotton or from the banana plant or whatever. We call it all pulp. Now I need something to make my paper on, and I have a wooden frame, and it has fiberglass window screen on the front, and paper makers call this the mold. Now this goes on top. This is a wooden frame, and paper makers call this the decal. Now there are two ways that you can make a base sheet of paper. You can either pull a sheet, which I'm going to do here, or you can pour a sheet. So I need to move the fiber around so that it's suspended in the water, and I just dip down in, come through, pull straight up, shake it off a little, take the excess off the mold, and I'm going to bring it over here to this little dish pan, because obviously I need something for the water to drain down into. Now if I wanted to make a sheet of nice white paper, I would just take the decal off, take this over, flip it over, press it, and dry it. And a lot of watercolorists or calligraphers make their own paper because that way they can control the surface. So I just want to get a little more of this cotton off here. And I need to wipe my hands off because I'm covered. Paper making is a little messy and a little damp. Usually when I'm working on a book, I have on rubber shoes because there's a lot of water on the floor. Now the fiber comes to me white like this, and then I pigment it. This is pigmented fiber. This is not paint. This is pigmented fiber. It's just like colored threads floating in water. Actually, it is colored thread floating in water. And this is the way I do my backgrounds. I just pour on the color fiber, and I can put one color on top of another because this is colored thread. It's not paint. If you listen real carefully, you can hear the water dripping. So when I'm working on a big piece, it pretty much sounds like a rainforest in here. Now I can mix colors if I want. And I won't mix this up a lot because I want a little bit of a yellow speckle. And that'll drain through. And you can manipulate it, you can pat it, move it around. So basically that's the way I get my backgrounds. And you can see you get a nice soft edge because as the water drains through, the fiber settles into place. To get a nice soft edge, like the grass in the background, I take and I put the pulp in squeeze bottles. Now this is not paint, this is fiber, just like I made the background color. And you would just squeeze this and squeeze out your design. Just like when you make a sandwich and use the mustard and ketchup in a squeeze bottle and you make a happy face or a heart or I love you on your burger, veggie burger, I'm a vegetarian. Or you can spoon it on, that gives you a nice soft edge. But if you want a hard edge, like the grass in the front or the child's face, then you cut stencils. And that's what I've done here. I've drawn the image that I wanted, grass, on this material. This is a recycled foam material, very similar to the meat trays at the market. And I put my stencil on the background, and I press it down firmly. I don't want to press it down too hard, because if I press it down too hard, when I go to pull it up, it might pull up some of the background. So now I want to fill this in with another color. And I can either spoon that, recycled from the fast food, or I can squeeze bottle it. And I like to use the squeeze bottles because I have a little more control. And I put several colors of green because, of course, if you go outside and you look at the grass, it's not the same color of green everywhere. And again, I can put a dark color on top of a light color on top of a dark color, and they'll each keep their own color because it's fiber, it's not paint. Isn't this relaxing? You can hear the water dripping. Now, I want to take the stencil off. I use a craft knife to do this. You can just use a toothpick. What you want to do is you just want to catch the edge, and you jiggle it, and you check to make sure that your pulp or your fiber is sticking to the background, not to your stencil. And if it does stick to your stencil, you just push it back with your toothpick or craft knife. And you can manipulate. See, that pulled a little up there. And that's an important thing to remember. If you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can redo it. So you can see, if you look closely, you can see that there are actual layers there, that the grass is a layer on top of the background layer. Now, I'm going to pat this gently because I want to put another stencil on top of this, and I want to make sure that the next stencil doesn't pick up that layer. And so here I have my bunny. I drew my image on my stencil material, cut it out. And now I'm going to put it on the background, and again, you press it down firmly, not too hard. And then you just fill in your cutout area. And basically this is the way, and we're going to have a clog. There we go. So usually I just squirt out, like towards you. Let's see if this one's better. And like I said, you can spoon this in. I just like the squeeze bottles because I have a little more control. My squeeze bottles I get from all sorts of places. Honey comes in some, fabric painting squeeze bottle. A good place to get squeeze bottles is from people who color their hair. But they're a little sensitive about this, I want to warn you, so ask for them very carefully. What you say is, if you know somebody who colors their hair, could they save the squeeze bottles for me? So now I want to give my rabbit an eye, and because this is pulp, it's not paint, I can take and manipulate it, roll it into a little ball. You could use a toothpick for this. Oops, got a little too much there. Put it in place where you want your eye. And then I'll put a little yellow in the center where the light. You can see I don't even have to be that tidy because the stencil blocks out the background, and that determines my shape. So now I'm going to fill in a little bit right here. A little more. Now I want to take my stencil off, and again I want to do that very carefully and slowly, jiggling it as I go, checking to make sure that the fiber is not sticking to the stencil, that it's sticking to the background. So press it down. And if it does pull up some areas, of course, just like I made the eye, you can add fiber. So there I have the rabbit. Now, I'm going to take the decal off. And you can see it's fairly thick. And this is very fragile at this point because it is like a pile of mashed potatoes. So I need to get this off my mold, and to do that I need something soft and absorbent. These are Papermaker's felts. You can use blankets, old blankets, or a pile of newspapers. And then I need some cloths that are wet. And what I use is interfacing from the fabric store, and I'm just going to use half of this and double it over. You can use men's handkerchiefs or those handy wipes from the kitchen work great. You just want something thin that's nice and wet because the pulp wants to go where it's wettest. That's called couching. Rhymes with smooching, spelled like couching. Means to transfer from one surface to another. So now I'm going to put another damp cloth on top. And I want my sponge to be damp. I want my sponge to be damp. I don't want it to be wringing wet, just damp. And I take and I press down firmly. And I squeeze out the excess water. Now some of that water is going down below into my Papermaker's felts, but a great deal of it's coming up into the sponge. Squeeze that out. The more water you get out and the more you compress your fibers together, the stronger your dry paper is going to be. Okay, let's see what we've flip this over. Peel back the fiber, the fabric I mean. And I have a sheet of wet paper. And you can see at this point it's pretty sturdy. Now I would take and put this in the vacuum table, which has a large vacuum pump, and it would suck out even more water. Then I would take and I would put this in the drying press, which is actually Homosoap board, which is made from recycled newspaper, and blotter paper, and that puts a downward pressure on it, and it pulls the moisture out of the paper and keeps it flat and smooth. So that's the way I make all the pictures in my books. Now this is a very small piece of paper. When I'm making